Hi, everyone, and welcome. I'm Lisa Sawsville, Executive Director of Vermont Coverts Woodlands for Wildlife. We're a peer-to-peer organization that works to educate landowners and others about sound forest management and wildlife stewardship. This year, we're celebrating 40 years of outreach, empowering landowners and others with the knowledge, tools, and community support to manage their woodlands and enhance wildlife habitat. If you enjoy our programs and would like to support our mission, please consider making a donation. You can give online on our website at www.vtcoverts.org. Today, we welcome Ali Kosiba. Ali is the UVM Extension Assistant Professor of Forestry. She has expertise in forest ecology, tree physiology, climate change, forest carbon, and climate adaptive forest management. We look forward to her addressing your questions about forests and forest management. Ali, take it away.
Thanks, Lisa. And yeah, thanks everyone for joining or I guess in the future watching this. So yeah, I just have like a handful of slides for folks that don't know me, don't know what UVM Extension Forestry does or UVM Extension kind of in general, and a little bit about what I do, what we do, and the resources we have. So before we jump into questions, I'll do that. And then folks submitted some questions. I can respond to those and we can open it up to questions, kind of discussion as well. Happy to do that. So, all right. So yeah, Lisa introduced me, work for UVM Extension. This is a fairly new position. Historically, UVM Extension had a forestry person, expert. Then there was a long lag. And so I came into this position almost 3 years ago. I'm coming up to the 3-year anniversary in September. So I am what I call a forest ecophysiologist. That's kind of a combination of tree physiology, as Lisa said, and forest ecology. So I really think about how trees work, how they function, how they respond to their environment and environmental change, and then how that influences the forests in a larger sense. I do serve in this role as a state extension forester, and a lot of people refer to me as the extension forester. Really, I work statewide and then even region-wide and larger than that on a lot of these topics. So I do focus on forest health, on climate change impacts of forests, on forest carbon, so thinking about how forests can help us mitigate climate change. And then also how we can use science and ecology information to make informed decisions on stewardship and management of our forests. And so the UVM Extension Forestry Program, what we do, I say we, but it's really me right now. I am trying to grow a team, and I do have a summer intern, but trying to add some staff, outreach folks, and grad students will be coming on in the fall. But we help to make information available to individuals and communities so that we can make informed decisions to contribute to the resilience and sustainability of our forests here in Vermont. And so what do we do exactly? Well, there's a couple things, kind of big buckets. Really, my goal is to provide information to people, science-based, reliable information, either that I create or other folks that I trust and know are doing good work create. So this can come from governmental organizations, other academics, nonprofits, all sorts of folks that are providing really good science information about our forests. So I have a website. You can just search for UVM Extension Forestry. It's pretty easy to find. And I'm adding stuff to this website all the time. So I'm trying to create new resources and find new resources that other folks create and add them. And they're kind of in buckets of topics, and those will change as new topics get addressed or I'm working on new projects. Also really trying to support social media outreach. So YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, launching an e-newsletter very shortly. If you're interested to sign up, there is a link on the website. I do a lot of creating of new resources for folks at a range of audiences. These are mostly geared here towards general audiences. Some are more specific, like you see in the bottom right, really for folks who manage your own sugar bushes, sugar maple forest for sap and syrup production, talking about carbon in those systems. But I have a lot of different range of resources, and sometimes I produce ones that are a little bit more technical for a forester audience or professional audience too. And all of these are available digitally on the website. And if you find me in person, I often have crates and crates of these printed as well. I give lots of presentations and webinars, just a smattering of them. And I've done some fun stuff, like I filmed with Jane Lindholm here, who's one of my, celebrity, local celebrities that I like on her. She does a But Why podcast for curious kids. And we talked about fall foliage and why that happens. So that was super fun to do. So I do all sorts of different outreach to different audiences. I also conduct research and do data analysis. And this is an example of a couple things that I've done recently. I lead the Vermont Forest Carbon Inventory. So this is an inventory of the forest benefits we get in terms of carbon. So carbon climate mitigation. So that's carbon storage and sequestration in our forests, and the different ways that that's affected from. This is showing an example of how we're losing forest cover over time in Vermont, and that then affects the many benefits, including carbon. And I'm also launching, or have been working on, a climate resilience assessment on private land. So if you are a private landowner that's doing climate focused management, please reach out. I'm looking for sites around the state where folks might be interested in having a crew come measure their forests and collect some data. And I'm also interested in this idea of fostering a community of practice. So there's a couple projects I've been working on, one with a student intern last year, where she took videos of folks that are doing some really good ecological stewardship on their land and try to showcase like what it looks like and the different examples of landowners and foresters that are really striving to manage their land in this way. I also do things like support conferences and different events. So this is an example. It's happening this September, the Northeastern Old Growth Forest Conference that will be at Middlebury College. So Middlebury College and UVM Extension are co-hosting that event. So that should be really fun. Lots of great speakers and most importantly, field trips to old forests. So that's what I got. Again, this is the website. Pop that in, search for UVM Extension Forestry, and my email is on that website too. So I always like to hear from folks if you want to reach out. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen. We can open it for questions. I also have some questions that folks submitted online, so I can start with those too.
Right, Allie, let's start with some of those that came in online first.
Yeah.
And then if any of you are online, you can type a question in the chat and we can go from there if you're not hearing your answers. One of the first questions that came in that I'm actually interested in hearing you speak about is beech. Beech have suffered from beech bark disease. So that's, already, I went down to Brattleboro and I actually saw firsthand beech leaf disease because it's not really here in the Champlain Valley yet. So what's going on with beech? What do we got to worry about? Is it going to stay?
I wish, it's tough. I think, these non-native new pests, insects, diseases are really, they can be super significant in our forests, right? We know that from chestnut blight that, decimated American chestnut in the early 1900s. We have beech bark disease, which actually, beech has been okay with it. We definitely have lost some beech. It's been many decades since we've had beech bark disease. It's a complex between a scale insect that sort of penetrates the bark and brings a fungus into the tree. And so it causes these pock marks on the bark of the tree and can kill trees. Really what it does is they lose vigor. And so they can become less competitive in a forest. They might not be able to ward off other stressors, like other fungi might be able to infiltrate them and things like that. And so the weaker ones have certainly died and perished over time. It's kind of sort of a slow death. And one of the reactions that the tree has to this, it's a great mechanism of resilience for beech trees, is they can stump sprout. And so what this means is they can send up shoots from their roots and from their stumps. So if the tree dies, or just from the roots that are in the soil, they send up little shoots. And so that's a different way that a tree can propagate itself. Normally trees propagate through seeds. Seeds, fall to the ground, they germinate, and they grow a little seedling. This is a clone of the parent tree. It's essentially like a little sprout that comes from the root, and they can grow really rapidly because they're attached to the parent tree. And so they have all the resources to tap into. And what this means is that For the beech tree, it never really dies, right? Because its roots, if the mature tree dies from beech bark disease, little stumps, root sprouts pop up. Still, this, it's still that same genetics. These trees, though, are still subject to beech bark disease. They're identical clones of the parent tree, and so they're still susceptible to beech bark disease. And they, because they are attached to this root system, often outcompete other tree species that are germinating by seed. So what we see in the forest is, it's a resilience mechanism by beech to still survive for a long time. Those sprouts likely never become mature trees, right? They go through this period of sprouting, death, and then they can reduce diversity in the forest because they shade out and take space and resources from other tree species. So we do get a little bit concerned with this response in the forest. We do see places that are just what we call a monoculture of beech sprouts. And again, they're not going to become glorious, beautiful beech trees. They're just going to succumb to death and sort of go through this pattern. And now, recently, in the last couple of years, we have a new threat to beech trees, which is a nematode. We call it beech leaf disease. It's not the best name for it because it makes it sound like maybe it's like fungal or some sort of pathogen. And it is it's a nematode, which is this tiny little worm that gets into the buds of the beech and basically eats those buds and deforms the leaves. And so what you see is not on so beech bark disease is going to be something you see on the stem, on the trunk of the tree with these little like pock marks and warts and things like that. Beech leaf disease is on the leaves. And if you look up into the canopy, the best way to identify it is you see this banding of the leaves. So there's like dark spots and light spots that are in strips. And we do have it in a number of counties and towns in Vermont. It actually is, unfortunately, Lisa, in Chittenden County. It's in Jericho. We found it. Jess Weichel, who is the research forest administrator. I actually don't know what her title is. Sorry, Jess. But she is a faculty at the University of Vermont, and she oversees our research forest. And with a bunch of students, they found a beech leaf disease at the Jericho Research Forest. So it does make us wonder, is it in more places and it just hasn't been surveyed? Right. So keeping an eye out. So if everyone can keep an eye out for weird looking leaves, and unfortunately beech has some other insects that do affect the leaves that aren't lethal. And some of those do cause similar sort of symptoms, but really that banding, if you're looking up from below the canopy up into the leaves, I think is the best way to identify the stripes of leaves. Look online, put in your search bar, beech leaf disease, and you'll see what I'm talking about. Like once you see it, you're like, okay, I know what that is. It is also non-native, comes from Japan, I believe. We don't know how it will interact with beech bark disease. This is sort of a big unknown. And we don't really even know how it's moving around. Seems like could be wind, could be rain, it could be birds. It's moving very quickly. It generally starts in the lower canopy, so the smaller trees first, and then goes up to the higher canopy layers, so the bigger trees. And so, I think before we know too much information, I think generally the principles that we followed for beech bark disease make sense. So favoring healthy looking beech trees, right? A tree that is healthy and vigorous, by definition, is going to be able to defend itself better against any stressor. And so if we're doing any sort of management, you're thinking about stewarding your forest, keeping that in mind, right? Like healthy, good looking, vigorous trees with big crowns, they're likely going to have a better ability. Those stump sprouts or root sprouts that I talked about that will never become mature trees, they could allow for proliferation of beech leaf disease. So removal of those, which allows for other species to germinate and get hold, is probably also still a good practice. So removing those by cutting, some people cut and spray herbicide. You do have to be really careful with herbicides and beech because they connect to their roots. So you can inadvertently spraying one stump, if it's connected by roots, it could affect a neighboring tree. So, if you're interested in beech management, county foresters, consulting foresters have a lot of expertise. They've been doing this for a long time. We don't want to eradicate beech. We're not looking for that. We're looking to help beech be healthier as a population. So if you have a lot of it on your property, of thinking about the healthiest trees and thinking about maybe reducing the density of some of those sprouts and unhealthy trees.
All right,
Any
thanks, Sally.
follow-ups? Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't
Folks have
know.
follow-ups.
Yeah, no, I'm sad to hear that it's in Jericho. I was like hoping it was moving a little slower, but I
Yeah,
mean, that's the same thing with EAB, Emerald Ash Borer. We, found pockets, but then you continue to find more and more as you look.
right.
So that's
Yeah.
disappointing too. So what is the status for EAB right now, and management of ash trees with Emerald Ash Borer kind of bearing down on us?
Yeah, I mean, that's been here longer than beech leaf disease. So it is pretty, if you look at the maps that the state of Vermont Forest Health Team has created, um, it's not in every town, but it's close to most towns, right? And so, for me, for example, I live in Bolton, technically has not been found in Bolton, but we're surrounded. And so I feel like I'm keeping my eye out. A lot of my neighbors let me know if they see some decline in ash. So the hard thing with EAB is when we see it, especially in forest trees. Street trees are a little bit different. You kind of see the symptoms earlier. In forest trees, by the time we kind of see the symptoms, there's been an infestation for a few years because the insect generally comes into the higher canopy levels. And ash is a very tall tree. I'm talking most about white ash is our more dominant ash species. We do have 3 different ash species in Vermont: white, green, and black, or sometimes people call it brown ash. But white ash, it's about 10% of our trees are white ash in the state. Obviously there's going to be different densities in different parts of the state. And it's a very tall tree. And so you often can't see the top of it. And that's where the emerald ash borer adults are coming in and laying their eggs first time. And so, by the time you see it at eye level or even above eye level, that means there's a pretty good infestation, unfortunately. There are some other signs we can look for, sort of dieback of the crown, what we call epicormic growth, which is when trees kind of leaf out from weird spots. So if you see weird tufts of leaves from the trunk, like lower than the main canopy, that's a sign of stress. The tree is responding to something that happened higher up. And so it releases, it can create some branches and leaves in a different place. And so that's something to keep in mind. Woodpeckers are a really good indicator. They don't always mean EAB. There's many other insects that woodpeckers are eating on an ash tree, but if you see a lot of woodpeckers, they can mean that they're going after the larvae. And so as far as treatment, there are insecticides that folks can put in, and there's been some good results from that, but it is expensive and labor intensive. So folks are using that on really, sort of like high value trees that might be around their house or in a park, or, really important trees. And folks can look into doing that. There is also biocontrol that the state of Vermont is releasing. The fact of the matter is we're not going to get rid of EAB. It's established in the state. What we hope is that the biocontrol sort of controls the population of the insect, and that we consider ways to sustain ash on the landscape. So through the insecticide, that we can preserve some ash that can then have seed to create new ash, and also through some stewardship mechanisms. So if you do have a lot of ash on your property, one thing you can think about is creating some canopy gaps near those mature ash. Ash does need quite a lot of sunlight for the seeds. The seeds will germinate in low light, but for the seedlings to grow up and become saplings and larger trees, they need a lot more light than, say, a sugar maple. So you do have to create some openings, but you could do that sort of near some healthy mature ash that then could create a new pulse of regeneration. And we do know that EAB, is not infesting those smaller size classes as much as the bigger trees. And so this idea that we could then, the insect population, increases, might kill a lot of ash trees. But then if we have a smaller a group of smaller trees that can grow up when the population of that insect kind of declines. So that's the sort of where we're thinking is the sort of best management option right now, to keep ash on the landscape as much as possible. So if you're interested in doing that, again, like reaching out to a county forester or a consulting forester for some help. First, identifying the ash on your land if you have any, or around your house. Thinking about if you want to use insecticides, or thinking about if you want to do some management to increase ash regeneration, could be a really important thing.
There's two things that I want to say. One is, sounds like the way we've dealt with spongy moth, right? You know, it's was criming. It was like this devastating thing, and now over time, it's sort of been modulated in many ways.
Yeah.
The other thing I love to share with landowners who are listening, because it's always sort of an aha moment for them, is to share that ash are dioecious, and so there are male trees and female trees. So keeping them on the landscape is important, but making sure you're keeping both male and female trees on your land is also important. More, I guess I hear more females than males. Is that correct?
I think it's the reverse, more males than females.
Okay.
Yeah.
See, I'm learning as well.
Gotcha. Now, like that, yeah. And that usually is the case because, like, to produce seed is a really costly process. Actually, pollen is not nearly as costly. And you'll see this with trees. Actually, they'll when trees mature, they will produce pollen first. It takes usually longer for a tree to produce seed. It has to be older in age. It is really like a costly process. So I believe that it's like 7-to-1, and so finding those female trees is really kind of important. Ash do not produce seed every year, so it's not that you can go out in the woods anytime and say, it's a female tree, this is a male tree. It's a little bit harder than that. And actually there are cases where there are some ash that can produce both male and female. Those are not very common, but it does happen. There's some funky things about trees. They can sort of switch sexes. They can do all this sort of odd stuff, which is very cool and adds to their adaptation and resilience in such situations. But there are folks that are doing this and are going out and flagging on an ash seed year. You can really see the seed in the canopy. Okay, those are female trees. I'm going to flag those ones. And so making sure, and you don't want to only have female trees, you want to have some males around it so that there is pollination of that seed. So that's really important. So if you're thinking about that, yeah, definitely reach out to someone like a forester, or, I can point you to some folks that can help if you're interested in doing that on your land.
Great. I do know we have a few questions. We have a few new landowners. So the questions, one was, as a new landowner, how can I quickly learn about my particular trees and forests? And the other one, we're new forest caretakers or stewards, and they're wondering how to get started.
Yeah, great. I love new landowners. It's awesome. And the fact that you're interested and want to get information is a great place to start. There's a lot of information, might seem overwhelming actually, but Vermont is a great place. We have so many different organizations that are providing information and help, technical assistance to landowners. I mean, I would say you're in a good place of engaging in some of these webinars. So either ones that are happening now and in the future, or recorded ones. As I mentioned, I have a YouTube channel with various topics to audiences. Coverts is a great organization, and we have Vermont Woodlands Association also has a YouTube channel. So there's a lot of information out there that you can get. And then, I think the first thing I would do is, or after that, establishing, some knowledge, is reaching out to your county foresters. So the state of Vermont Forest Parks and Recreation has county foresters. They're actually, it's a little complex because they no longer operate at a county basis. They're at a town basis, but we call them county foresters, sort of historical. But if you go online and write in your search bar, Vermont County Foresters, you'll come up with a map. And you can also reach out to me if you need help I'm happy to help you navigate. And you can look up your town. You type in your town, say who your county forester is, and it will give the contact information. They're all amazing, super knowledgeable, friendly, eager to help. And they'll come out and talk to you. It doesn't matter what size parcel you have. Doesn't matter if you like what your objectives for your land is. That's not what they're trying to help you. And they will help you navigate, like sort of thinking about some of the stuff, but also connecting you with other experts. So if you have a larger parcel, you might want to think about enrolling in the state's current use program, and then you would connect with a consulting force, and they can help you talk through some of these different options and where you want to go with your land. So that's really helpful because they'll walk with you through your woods or your parcel of land. Then I would just say, like, reaching out, Vermont Coverts, I'll plug the cooperators training. If you want to give a weekend up, it's an awesome way to learn pretty much everything that a landowner needs to know, from like really basic to a little bit more complex parts of your forest, aspects of your forest, and also how to navigate all the resources and to get financial help with some of this. There are financial cost share programs to help landowners do good stewardship work. So, I really encourage you to seek out those, sign up for different newsletters that folks have that give events and upcoming webinars and things like that.
That's great. So I will do a little plug. Our fall training this year, we have a few spaces left, is September 12th to 14th at Kehoe Conservation Camp near Castleton. And we do host that program twice a year in the spring and the fall. And you can learn more about the program on our website, which is www.vtcoverts.org. I put that in the chat. The other thing I want to share is Coverts is in partnership with a number of different organizations through an LSR grant that providing or trying to engage new landowners. So if you're a new landowner, I've put a website in there that you can click on or copy. We're offering some technical assistance, one-on-one just to get you started, along with, it's in the layout stage of a new forest landowner guide that will bring you through some information as well. So those are some other places that you can start as well. So exciting things that are happening. All right, we have a question. How has the federal funding landscape for assistance for forest landowners changed recently? What do you know?
Yeah, well, yes. So this is mostly where landowners are going to get some assistances through NRCS, farm agency folks kind of call it, and they have two programs, EQIP and CSP, and they have this you might be more familiar actually for farmers. It's a bigger program for farmers, but it helps farmers do some things that help with like water quality and manure management and cover cropping and things like that. But they also have a lot of practices for forests. And so it's a great way. It's a cost share program. So basically, it helps pay for some of this work, and it helps pay for a forest management plan if you don't have one. And then you can do things like some management for, say, you want to enhance wildlife habitat on your property, or you want to upgrade culverts on your forest roads because they're too small to accommodate some of the heavy rain we're having. They have practices that can help pay for that. Right now, things are a little bleak. A number of the NRCS technical assistance providers, those are the folks that would come out to your property and help you navigate what are good practices, help you walk through the program, have been let go. The forecasts for the federal budget for the next fiscal year reduces NRCS funding, I think, by 88%. So that's huge. I don't know, right? This is proposed. I don't know where we'll end with that. There is a lot of funding cuts in the proposed budget that will affect forestry and forests. And so including, I'll say, our experimental forests and a lot of research that's happening, extension. And so I don't know where the final budget will land, but right now there are significant cuts to that program. It's, it's of course disappointing because it's a great way for landowners to help pay for some of these practices that might be otherwise cost prohibitive, right? A landowner is going to have to pay out of their pocket if they can get cost share, and it then benefits downstream water quality, benefits bird habitat or bat habitat. All these things are, the health and resilience of our forest. We all benefit from those things. And so, I don't, I don't have a magic ball. I don't know what's going to happen with that. So I'm sorry, I don't have better news on that front. Call your representatives.
Great. Okay. With that, looking at current status of things, someone was wondering what the current status of the forest carbon programs in Vermont are.
Yeah, that's a great question. So for folks that aren't aware, there have been emerging programs in the last, I don't know, decade or less than that, really targeted towards smaller forest landowners to help them basically monetize the carbon benefits of their forest. So in other words, forests are taking in and storing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, and they store that carbon for different amounts of time. And there is this what we call a carbon offset, that basically a landowner could sell that benefit to someone else that is looking to reduce their carbon footprint. And so it's a sort of a trading system that's based on the forests and carbon. It also works across different non-forests. So you can do this in grasslands and agricultural settings as well. And there's a couple of these programs that are in Vermont that allow forest landowners of, upwards, I think like minimum acreage is usually around 30 acres, or some of them are 50, to enroll in some of these programs. So the Family Forest Carbon Program is probably the most notable. That's a partnership between the Nature Conservancy and American Forest Foundation. And that allows folks to enroll in two different practices, either sort of a grow older forests, which is sort of like a passive management, in that you're not harvesting any wood products or doing any active management in that forest. And then there's also a program called Enhance Your Woodland, where you do some practices to enhance the complexity and conditions of that forest that are active. And there are a couple other carbon programs, conserve carbon, and a couple others that are available. Most of those other ones are usually a passive management approach. So that means there's very little active management allowed during the contract period. And these contracts can vary in length. Usually they're at least 10 years, if not 22 longer years. And so, yeah, a number of landowners have enrolled in those in Vermont. I think it's a slower rollout than maybe folks expected, just because it takes a long time to get people enrolled and verified and all these kind of complexities with monetizing something you're basically leaving in the woods and you're trading, selling to another entity. I don't know how carbon markets are going to evolve in the next few years as we have fewer incentives for businesses to reduce their carbon footprints from a federal government side of things. I think there are going to be a lot of entities that are still going to want to do this, but really carbon markets have been driven by corporations. You think about the big corporations, airlines that want to reduce their carbon footprint, but they are sort of limited because of technology or just, the size of their company, all sorts of things that make it really hard to reduce their emissions. So they then look to offset some of those emissions, at least in the short term. And that's really been the driving force behind this. And it is a great way to have these, to incentivize companies, basically helping to pay for good stewardship in our forests on small parcels. So I love that aspect of it. I love that landowners can get some revenue that they can use for good stewardship, invasive plant removal, whatever, keeping their forests as forests, right? And so that is awesome. And so we'll see how they evolve in the future. There are a few thousand acres of carbon programs in Vermont and more in the pipeline, I think. And so we'll see how those evolve in the future as far as, if there is a market for selling those offsets is really how they get funded. And so I hope that still still happens.
Great. There was one other question,
Yeah.
and it sort of addressed climate change. They wanted to know where they could find resources on climate change, and I would also kind of add to that. If I wanted to manage my forest with climate change in mind, what are your, first recommendations?
Well, not to be too self-serving, but I a lot of the things I produce, I do focus on climate change impacts to forests and also management recommendations. So outside of those two, carbon and climate change, which are really two sides of the same coin. And so I would direct that anybody to look at my articles in Northern Woodlands magazine. So they're on the UVM Extension Forestry website. You can also go to Northern Woodlands magazine, and they're free. You don't need a subscription to access those. Those were grant funded, and so they are freely available there. And it's a 4-part series on climate change. The first one is just, sort of introduction to how climate change affects our forests here in the Northeast. And there is a different article on management techniques you can use. And so direct folks to look at that. I also have a guide that I made with Vermont Woodlands Association and the state of Vermont Forest Parks and Recreation. It's called 12 Steps to Climate Resilience, Managing Your Land with Climate Change in Mind, or Manage Your Forest with Climate Change in Mind, I think is the title. And that's meant to be really approachable, give folks concrete steps that they can think about if they want to manage their land with climate change in mind. And they don't have to be, they're probably complementary to other things you're doing in your forest that can help bird habitat, that can help other aspects of your forest. And so thinking about that, and we have a little checklist. If you do have a management plan, you can go through the checklist with that. I have lots of webinars that go over this 12 steps guide. If you're interested in that, just go to the UVM Extension Forestry YouTube channel and you'll see those. And I often give them in person too. It's sort of something I am frequently doing. And so, yeah, check out those resources.
Sounds great. There's a question if you have any recommendations on any new books on forests or forest management, or even some old ones that you might suggest if someone was looking to bone up a little bit.
Yeah. Well, obviously, and I know Tim's read it, but Ethan Tapper's book is great. How to Love a Forest. We definitely plug that for thinking about, the role that we all can have as stewards in our forests, or maybe you don't own forests, but you are involved in your town forest, right? And so I think that's a really nice introduction for folks to think maybe differently about forest management. There is a good book, and I wasn't prepared. I'm looking on my bookshelf for this right now. It's an old book. It's called like Managing Your Small Woodlot. Oh gosh, I don't see it. I'm gonna have to, oh, hold on. I do see it.
And she's off.
This is an oldie but a goodie. It's actually called Working with Your Woodland, a Landowner's Guide. Actually, and you might recognize some
Molly,
folks.
isn't it?
Yeah, Molly
Yeah.
Beatty, Charlie Thompson, and Linda Levine. And this is a great book. I really like this. I don't even know when this was printed. And so there might be stuff that, we have updated things. I don't know if it talks about climate change and some of these other more novel aspects, but as far as like thinking about getting to know your woods, working with foresters, it's really I like that book a lot.
That is a good one. We used to give that one out often with the Coverts training. We started recently, probably about when it came out, just because it was a little easier, a little less, now I'm going to have to disappear for a second. Oh, Steve Long's More Than a Woodlot, which is
that's a good one too.
A great
Yes.
intro for particularly for new landowners. So this is one of the ones we give out
that
with
one
the
too.
Coverage training. Yeah, there are so many good books.
Yeah.
Allie and I have talked books. We actually have some on the YouTube channel of books recommended by professionals. And Allie was on there and she's like, wait, what about this one? Wait, what about this one? So lots
I'm
of good
a little bit
options.
of a collector of books that have to do with like forests or natural history or anything like that. So yeah, lots of them.
Allie, what do you think of assisted migration? Like I grew up in Connecticut and like there are tulip trees in my backyard. I was just down there again recently and I'm like, oh, I never see tulips up here. Should I be taking some of those seeds and bringing them up here, or is that a bad thing?
So, okay, so assisted migration, yeah, the idea that we could like move species that might be better adapted to the future conditions, right? So tulip poplar, tulip tree is an example, doesn't, its sort of northern limit is sort of northern Massachusetts. You could see that it could be in southern Vermont, but can it actually move? It could probably be further than that as far as the climate conditions, but can it actually move on its own? That's where we might come into play and move that tree. And so, I do think it is it's going to be important, and probably it already is an important strategy. I'm under the idea that we need multiple strategies and think really creatively about different ways that we can boost the resilience in the adaptation of our forests. There are some, critical things we need to think about when we do assisted migration. How far are we moving that individual tree seed or seedling or whatever it is? Because trees can't move. You can't bring a tree down from Florida up here. It might survive the summer totally fine, but we're still get cold winters and it's not adapted to those conditions. And we know these kind of results because scientists for years have used what we call common gardens or provenance studies, where they, maybe for sugar maple, collect seed all over the sugar maple range and plant those seeds in different locations. So you might have a plantation in Maine and a plantation in Pennsylvania, a plantation in New York, and you have the same seed sources planted out in sort of a grid, and you watch how they respond. And we do see that, like, if you move a tree too far, it doesn't do well. And the rule of thumb for most species, about 200 miles is kind of the limit. If you go further than that, it just cannot, it's too extreme, right? We do have now some more, I will say, like technical or sort of more guidance rather than using that rule of thumb. We have what you call seed zones. And Carrie Pike and others at the Forest Service has made a really great seed zone map. And you can look at those. I think in Vermont, we have only 3 seed zones, sort of like a north, central, and south. And some of them overlap, like the seed zones of similar latitude can from different states, right? It's not limited to a state boundary. And so we can use those. So here in Bolton, if I want to plant, I'd want to get from, rule of thumb is getting from a seed zone south would be great. Is that practical? Can you do that and go to a nursery and say, I want this seed zone? No, you cannot. You can go harvest your own seeds, or if you have access, you can do that. And that's a possibility. But we haven't quite caught up with the need for maybe planting and restoration of these climate adapted species with the ability to find those. And then there are some other things we just need to be cautious about, right? Like if you dig up your tulip tree, Lisa, and you get soil with that. What if there are invasive earthworms in that soil, right? And you bring it up to a place here in Vermont and there weren't earthworms there. So you're introducing something that might actually be harmful. And so that's why nurseries are sort of good to buy things from, because they have like sanitary protocols. Seeds can be a little bit better because yes, you could have a weevil or something in there, but it's less likely you're going to transmit like earthworms or fungi or something like that. So it's just one of those things. I don't think that is a reason not to do it, but something we need to be mindful of is like how far we move stuff and what are we moving that we didn't mean to move. And again, like back to the Northern Woodlands series, that the second article in the climate change series is all about future climate adapted tree species. So I talk about what they are, how we can think about species ranges of our species that we have here in Vermont. And we're very lucky. We have a lot of species in our forests, and we have species that, their ranges go north. We have a lot of species that can easily exist here. Their ranges are south. And so there's a lot of possibilities for forests to kind of rearrange. And the goal we want with like thinking about forests in the future is the forest to remain forest. So the species might change a little bit naturally based on different species coming in, like red oak, or maybe we facilitate that change. through assisted migration. So, if you're interested in that kind of stuff, reach out to a county forester for some advice. Finding the seedling stock is going to be your hardest thing. It's expensive, time consuming too, and deer love planted seedlings. So you gotta be careful about that. So it's not the easiest, I will say.
Tim notes in the comments that as a landowner, he frequently visits the UVM extension website and the Coverts websites, and he says there's a lot of useful information there. And he just wanted to reiterate your comments about the county foresters. They're extremely knowledgeable and helpful, and he feels very lucky to have been able to interact with them on his land and in his community. So
Thanks,
that's
Tim.
really good. He also had a question,
Yep.
and I don't know if you'll have the answer to this one, but how are budget cuts at the state level affecting FPR and UVM extension? Any ideas on that?
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, Josh Hallman will be here right next week or something. Yes, save that question for him. I don't know exactly. Right now, the extension, we're most concerned with the federal budget that's proposed. That is a significant cut to nationwide extension. Again, it's proposed. I don't know. But there is some concern about things like the urban community forestry program nationwide, other cuts to funding that will affect the state forest parks and recreation programs and services they offer. I don't, a lot of it is, we don't know till it happens. And I will say that I have a lot of concern too about research, like forest research that we all rely on. It builds upon previous research, and that is threatened as well. Things like our experimental forests that are really critical for us monitoring change, like the Hubbard Brook Experimental Forest, to name one. So I don't know how it's going to play out. So if you are concerned, again, really appreciate folks make that, like, voice your concern that how important these services are to you, what you do as a landowner, your decision making. That is really helpful to all of us in justifying like the work we do.
Great. So what are you most optimistic about our forests, right? We hear, a lot of there's invasive species, both plant and insect, and, there's, threats to the forest from, we have forest fires out west. Is that a concern here? So what are you most optimistic about?
Well, I'd say two things, and this is like, one is very specific. Well, maybe both are specific to Vermont. But first of all, just the landowners and the foresters, professionals that work in Vermont really care. I'm always amazed by how caring folks are. They can have different goals and different priorities and different backgrounds, all this stuff, but people really love their forests here and love forests and love trees. And that is just always so uplifting for me when I do work. It's just people are really eager for information and help and just like, yeah, just care a lot about forests. And then on the forest side of things, I am concerned about climate change. I'm concerned about pests and pathogens, but forests are incredibly resilient. I mean, they are adaptable. Tree species can move around and relocate. We've seen this. We had, 10,000 years ago, we were covered in ice. There was no forests here, and forests came back. That is a long time frame, but it is incredible. I'm always amazed. You come across like an old sugar maple that has, one branch living and it's hollow on the inside, but it's still alive, right? Like, trees are pretty amazing organisms. And so, I think they have a lot of capacity to withstand a lot of things. And so I'm really hopeful about that. Like, if we kind of like listen to the forests, we, use science and sort of our knowledge, traditional ecological knowledge, all sorts of things, like understand, the forest and sort of work with it, try to steward that forest. I think we can really achieve good things. And so I'm like very hopeful about that.
That's great. I should end there, but
Don't ask me another budget question.
No more budget questions, but it is, I should have asked the optimistic after this one. This one popped up in the chat, but it's like, what do you see as the biggest threat to our forests?
Yeah. I mean, I think in the, it's probably pests and pathogens. If we got a new pest, for example, Asian longhorn beetle, it's really has been really successfully contained. So this is a large beetle that is a big pest specifically of maple, but it is a whole host, like slew of host trees. It's been mostly in in cities like Worcester, Massachusetts is an example. It doesn't move fast. It's big. It's easy to spot. So it's been actually fairly easy to contain. It doesn't mean they often have to cut down the trees that it's infested and burn them and get rid of them, but it hasn't spread a lot. And so I'm hopeful of that. But if we did get that in the forest, wow, it could really be extremely detrimental, because unlike emerald ash borer, which really affects ash, and would be really, it would be very ecologically destructive to lose all ash. Asian longhorn beetle has so many other hosts, and maple being one of them is such a dominant. Red maple, sugar maple, we have many maple species. Plus it affects a lot of other species. So, its impact could be a lot bigger. The good news, like I said, is that folks have been working really hard to contain it. I hope the funding for those containment programs continues, because we benefit from that. Like, we benefit from Worcester and other places in Massachusetts really working hard to keep that insect in check. And so that does take all of us, right? Early detection. If you see something weird, I'll plug the Vermont Forest Parks and Recreation Forest Health Team. Josh Hallman is going to do an Ask the Expert, but they also have an online portal. It's called What's Wrong with My Tree. It can submit a photo. If you at all see something weird, you think you've never seen before, just when in doubt, submit it, because it could be the first one. And it's so important, if we can detect something early, we actually can eradicate it. If we don't, it makes it much harder. And so, it takes all of us. Kids often are really good at detecting these things for the first time. And so, yeah, please do that if you see something weird.
That's the first time I heard the "What's wrong with my tree." I'm sticking it here in the chat so people can go look at that if they want to throw something in there or ask a question of Josh and his team at the lab. So that's really good to know. I love when I learn new things through these conversations. That's awesome. I've had a really interesting, year of learning and seeing new things this year. Getting out, that's what I could tell all the new landowners: get out and walk your land, get out and see what you have. Use apps, on your phone, like Seek or iNaturalist, and Merlin, which is one for listening for birds. These are all ways that you can connect with your forests, connect with the wildlife that are there and the plants, and learn what's there so you can develop your goals and objectives of what you want to do for your forest. But so I think that's a great way for people to get out there and continue to learn as well. Do you have a favorite app that you use, Allie?
I love all this. Yeah, and I will say that 12 steps of climate resilience, the first step is get to know your woods, get to know your land. And I do have in that 12 steps, there is a QR code to a website that I list a lot of additional resources, including many of the apps. So if you want to find that Merlin, Seek app, so those are two that I use. I love Merlin. It's great because you could hear a bird. And that's awesome. Both of those, they're not always 100% accurate, so just be mindful of that.
Right.
I also say, I love a good paper guidebook too. There's a lot of good guidebooks for identifying trees from leaves or from bark that can be really helpful, because Seek is often not that. Some of them aren't as good with trees. So to identify different, a spruce, a black spruce from a red spruce is not going to be able to do that, fortunately. Better for herbaceous plants and some of those mushrooms and things like that. But good guidebook. Yeah, and just walk your land different times of the year. Take notes of different things that you see. And that could be really impactful to see changes and sort of the patterns and phenology of your land.
Yeah, we have upcoming on August 2nd, a summer tree ID program that's going to be in the Hubbardton area, but anybody anywhere is welcome to attend that. You can find out more on our website. And then later in August, we're going to be having a nature journaling workshop with Claire Walker Leslie. And that's a really fun one it's a way to write down those things that you're seeing or draw them, or however. There's all different ways to keep a nature journal. You do not have to be an artist. And I am I am definitely in that boat because I am not an artist and I love keeping mine. So those are coming up in August as well. So, all right, well, we're rounding on 1 o'clock. If anybody has any questions, go ahead, last minute questions, you can type in the chat. And Allie, if you have any last minute thoughts that you'd like to add as we wrap up, please do so now.
I guess just, thanks for being here, watching this, and just say like there's no, every question, like don't hesitate to reach out to someone, me or someone else with questions like, you know, we're always happy. There's lots of folks that are happy to help you. So, please tap into the community. It's a good one. Get to know other folks around you that also have forests. They can be really knowledgeable about the local conditions. So just, great to talk about forests and stewardship.
Thanks so much for joining us today, Allie. Thank you all
Thanks.
for joining us. As Allie said, reach out and, you can visit our websites. You can email us. Mine is lisa@vtcoverts.org and Allie's, yours is?
Alexandra.kosiba@uvm.edu. Just
And I'll
search
send
for
that
me.
out.
You can find me. Pretty easy.
That's right. I'll send those out with
Yeah.
a link to this recording for anybody that wants to watch it again or share it with friends and family. And Allie, thank you and have a great afternoon.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.